I know it's a little bit of an awkward time. It's 6 o'clock in the evening. You're either going to have your really early dinner or you're just going to have to wait and have a little bit of a later dinner. But thank you all for coming. I'm Cindy Grant. Myself and Terry McTaggart, Myself and Terry McTaggart are the organizers of the Learn and Live program, which is a relatively new program here in Diamond Lake. This is the second series that we've had. We had our first inaugural series was back in the fall. We had 3 sessions, and it was titled Coming of Age and Wellness and Learning. And it was about how the brain works, how we think, how we age, how to keep ourselves from getting frail in elder years. And it was very well attended. Then we took a break over the winter. But Terry and I and a few others, Debbie, of course, I must say before she's going to leave, this series is only possible because of the good services of the library, and in particular, Debbie Krause. She is our support. More than a support, she is our enabler. So this is the second in the series. And we've titled this one Partnering with Loss. We would like to, when Sandra and Bonnie titled it Partnering with Loss, which is a wonderful title, and it is what we're going to talk about, I wanted to put a colon learning how to live with loss. But they thought that was too many words, so we didn't do that. But I wanted to get the word and live in there somewhere. Before I turn it over to them, I'm just going to do a little bit of advertisement. As you know, this is the first of 2 sessions, tonight and next Monday, with both Sandra and Bonnie. Then there's a week or so break, and we've got another presentation coming up starting on April 25th, and it's a 3-parter. So April 25th, May 2nd, and May 9th. Some of you may have seen an email I sent out where I had the wrong dates, and I apologize for that. Don't ever do things at like 7 o'clock at night. It was my lesson. But it's April 25th, May 2nd, May 9th, and it's titled Creativity and Applied Imagination. And that's going to be presented by Barb Davidge. I don't know how many of you know Barb. She's relatively new in town. But I'm just going to read you a little bit of that she sent me. Creativity is the 5th dimension in fact, a new type of relations to social contract. It comes from within, from the core of our being. It resides in us all. It's really quite free. And then it goes on for you the rest. But it's creativity and applied imagination. So how do you create it? It's a little bit like, for those of you that go back to your working worlds, it's a little bit like change management. But change management for your life, not for your work. So yeah, don't roll your eyes at that change management. So stay tuned for more announcements about that, and look at your calendars at the end of April, and try to join us then. Terry and I are hoping that this Learn and Live is going to just organically grow. We'd like to get a bit of a groundswell of interest. We have a little bit of waitiness for tonight, which is exciting. We'd like to be able to grow it, attract speakers from outside locations, speakers from Ontario. There's a speakers bureau for third age learning or lifelong learning in Ontario. It would be wonderful to attract some of them and really get a large third age learning, lifelong learning program here in Diamond. But if we could get a groundswell of interest and start to build up our interest, we'll move into larger rooms in the community center. We may have to start to charge a bit of a fee if we start to attract speakers from outside the region. But we really hope that this is the beginning, the infancy of a much larger lifelong learning program. So with that, I'll stop with the advertising and I'll start to introduce tonight's program, which is Partnering with Losses. we're so lucky to have Sandra Pesman-Hardy and Bonnie Magnulo with us. They're both well-trained in the area. Sandra is American-born, professionally educated in New York and Boston. Has a master's in social work and a registered social work. Is registered social work in Ontario. Practicing her career for well over 50 years in both the U.S. and Canada. Currently, she maintains a private counseling and consulting service practice in Nagpur, as well as facilitating groups and consulting with Wellspring, Niagara. And I love this sentence. A major belief that Sandra holds strongly is that good mental health affects us all. Therefore, it's important to be informed, take action when needed, and above all, to feel better. These tenets are what she and Bonnie will share with you today and next Monday. And Bonnie Magnulo is the executive director of the Nagpur Lake Community Health Care Service, which I know many of you know about. If not all of you know about it, I'm sure Bonnie and myself would be happy to tell you more about it. Bonnie started her journey with death in mind, and she lost her brother back in 2001. Her background was education, after which she went on to obtain a certificate in thanatology, the study of death, dying, and grief. She brings years of business and consulting skills to her experience. And her quote is, and I love this one too, there are two types of pains, one that hurt you and the other that changes you. So on that note, and I know we have kind of in our publication this, tonight isn't going to be about grief. They will touch on grief, death, and dying, because it's one kind of loss. But it's any kind of loss. It's think of the loss of your car, or the loss of a home, or the loss of a pet, or the loss of your career. It's not about how. It's not only about how to cope with grief and death. It's about how to positively cope with loss. And on that note, okay.
I don't know. Can you hear? We turn that off.
Turn it down a little bit.
Turn it fast, and apparently if you turn it down, the noise is still there.
Oh.
You can open the door and turn this out and turn this off. Turn it off.
Yeah.
Is there no low? It's just full on or nothing?
There is a low. She said, well,
Try it.
Try it, please. The noise is still there.
No, but it's not bad.
The sound is bad. Way better. Great. So just firstly, my name is Sandra, and this is Bonnie. Many of you probably already know that. But I want to say before we even start to speak that you all deserve a real pat on the back, because this isn't a topic that people are generally open to come out to. And it's wonderful. Bonnie and I, as Cindy said, are not here to go through an educational focus. It's experiential. It will bring up various emotions, but I think both of us are feeling that the more we can talk about things, the better it is for yourselves, for those you love, for those who love you. As professionals, Bonnie and I have over 80 years of experience together. So that seems like a hell of a long time. But we're still pretty young at heart. So, and as individuals, we both had to learn how to partner with our own life's losses. So we can identify with you personally as well as coming from a professional standpoint. So I think that enables us to wear two hats. This presentation today is interactional and experiential for you to evaluate your view of loss. And we're here not to talk at you, but to talk with you and to open you up and help you to learn a new skill set. So just realize how strong and how courageous you are to be here tonight. That's step one. making that decision is terrific. Before we do meditation, do you want to say anything?
Sure. So first of all, I want to say, I know it's going to be hard to look anywhere else but my flashy shoes. But please try to pay attention. No. I am wearing a mask this evening because if you don't know, I do work with people that are very vulnerable. So I see some of you also have masks on. Thank you. Just because I think it's a personal choice to protect yourself if you want to or not. And this is for me and my clients. So I hope that my voice is generally loud enough. I shouldn't have to, you shouldn't have to lip read, but if you can't hear me, just tell me to speak up.
So, because we've all, as Cindy said, kind of rushed in and come from another space, we like to just take a moment to center ourselves, to relax, and to let you know that what we talk about here today, whatever it triggers in you, you can choose to share or it can be confidential. This is hopefully a time to get to where you want to be about loss. This is non-judgmental. This is your own privacy. Do your work within. You all have been given pad and some paper because there'll be some, it's not homework. I know everybody I know says, no homework, no homework. You're not going to give me homework. But we need to do some experiential things in order to connect with what you may be feeling. So we thought we would just do a brief calming exercise to just take us from where we were to where we'd like to be now. So if you want, take off your coat and just get yourself comfortable. And you've got bright lights here, but we'll try and just allow yourselves to close your eyes and settle down. And just try and allow yourself to relax. Sit comfortably. And just help yourself settle. Focus on your breath. Just become aware of the air as it goes in through your nostrils and out through your mouth. And whenever you feel ready, just slowly let your eyes close. There's no place that you must go right now. Nothing else that you must do. Just allow yourself to focus on your breath. The breath is your life force, one of the greatest gifts we are given. And just let go at this moment of any thoughts or feelings or images that may arise. If they keep recurring, you may want to just put them in a jar and put a lid on it. Put them on a shelf in your mind's eye. And when you become distracted, just gently bring your awareness back to the sensation of your breath. The breath as you inhale and exhale. Take a few moments to enjoy the experience of coming to rest. These moments are some of the most healing times, both for our minds and our bodies, and the cellular structure. You may have noticed as you breathe and just take the air into your lungs. It's not quite as calming as if you inhale and push that air right down into the diaphragm, expanding your abdomen. And then as you exhale, contracting your abdomen and moving it out. expanding and then letting it contract. And feeling very calm and peaceful. There's nothing you need to think about right now. Just relax. You may want to repeat to yourself the words, I am, as you inhale, and the word relaxed as you exhale. When you're feeling really comfortable, I'd like you to take a moment and just rejoice in all the good things that you have done in the past. Think of some positive qualities that you have inside you. Perhaps patience, generosity, or kindness. And maybe reflect on an occasion where you have utilized those qualities. Allow yourself to feel the warmth of your own appreciation. How wonderful it is. How wonderful it is. Now broaden your attention to include the people you feel close to. You may want to rejoice at their positive qualities and the different ways in which they care for you and for each other. Allow yourself to reflect on that experience. Enjoy that sensation of delight of receiving others' kindness and generosity. Now move your attention further out and allow yourself to rejoice at all the caring actions that take place between people, teachers in schools, parents and children, medical staff in hospitals, all the people who contribute to well-being. Now you can think about all the people who write letters and campaign for a better world, for the end to war. You recall their contribution. And the qualities and deeds of people who work to make our universe better. And as you do this, you move that extension of warmth that you have given to yourself, the feeling of warmth throughout your world, your personal world, and then out into the universe, beyond the bounds of time and space. That wonderful warmth of rejoicing and delight. You may want to repeat to yourself, how wonderful this is. How wonderful this is. Just imagine what it would be like if we took a few moments every day to just rejoice in ourselves and those who love us and who we love and those who we care about and in our world. Be very relaxed and very comfortable. Give yourself permission to enjoy this space. And ending your meditation with words, may all beings be happy. And whenever you wish to return to the present, just slowly count to 5. Open your eyes. As you do, move your shoulders up, your back, down, and point on your fingers and your toes as you return to the present. I hope that you're feeling everything's feeling okay.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, okay, let's go. So we are going to be asking you to think about losses in your life. So as we mentioned, it's not necessarily a person. It can be any kind of loss in your life. And again, I know that Sandra said we were going to be careful with privacy and confidentiality. So, for those of you that know anyone in the room, if things do get said, because this is a sharing time, and we hope that you will open and share with us so we can talk about all different situations. We do ask that we don't go back out there and talk about what was talked about in here, because it's kind of, a very sensitive, loss is a sensitive subject, no matter how we look at it, whether it's a divorce or loss of a job or, any type of loss is a dangerous subject to be talking to others about. So,
Even those silly losses, like the little dress that you loved when you were 6, and those little smocking dresses, and you remember those, and you think, oh, I'm 10 now, and it doesn't fit me anymore, and nobody saved my dress, or whatever children are going to give it to.
Yeah, absolutely. There are other losses that are a little bit more personal. I think of a client that I had that actually lost a limb. And, you don't look at that as though it's a loss in the normal sense of a loss, but I mean, it's a huge loss. And with that type of loss, it penetrates so many different areas in your life, as most losses do. You are defined differently, you are someone different. There's all kinds of questions that go with that type of loss. So that is a very, very hard and difficult loss.
And sometimes other losses are a friend or a family member moves away. I think of the loss of freedom from COVID. I mean, yes, we're sitting here. 6 months ago, we wouldn't be sitting here, would we? We would be doing this on Zoom, and you would have little boxes, and you would all be looking at each other like this and trying to figure out what was going on and asking one another, did you hear me? Do you understand what I'm saying? And sort of nodding, and the other person who's running the program saying, I wonder if they meant yes or what. So even that's a very simple thing that we've all kind of come to participate in. But our loss of what we could do before is another loss, and many of us have had hard times. Certainly kids have, and lots of people who've been quite isolated have experienced that. So do we want to start with an exercise?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we could have some examples of loss from everyday everybody, and anybody, if there's anybody that wants to share. Sure.
I have to just be really careful. I write on the board with this, it will never come on. As much as it would be great to have indelible things on the board, I didn't want to see some person's kid.
So I think instead of a recent loss, something that has just happened, that maybe we can look back in our lives, like the blue dress, that was a good one, because, in order to say goodbye, we really sort of have to say hello, and that kind of is where we're going with what we're doing. So if you have a loss that you'd like to share, an early on loss that happened to you in your life, that would be awesome. You can just
pop it out.
Yeah.
Shout it out.
Our dog.
Okay.
Little whistle.
Did she fall off her tuffet? Pardon? Did she fall off
Yes.
her tuffet? I saw someone over here.
I lost the top of my finger being moved.
Oh.
Is there anyone else?
Lost like my nose.
Oh my goodness, how old were you? And your doll is everything. Lost the doll at 6 or 7. And another one?
Loss of a mother at 5.
Are there any other losses? We need a couple more.
Probably going back to father. I don't know if it's the right word, but lost for some reason. I've given a lot more children than
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And some of those kinds of changes happen within us, and so it's difficult to talk about. It's somebody who has a loss that people see, people talk about it. You break your leg, somebody says, "Oh, how are you?" They don't say, "How are you?" if you've lost your fertility. They don't even know. It's hard to talk about.
And there was someone else over there?
loss of marriage. Age 75. Suddenly.
I missed the end.
Loss of marriage suddenly after 47 years.
Thank you so much for sharing, you guys. This is going to help us with our walk. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question? I mean, there's a whole range of things, right, from a doll to a marriage to fertility. Not to quantify or say one is more important than another, but could there be happy losses? Could there be not sad losses?
Every loss is like a coin. You got to have a gain in order to have a loss.
Yeah.
If you have no gain, there will be no loss.
Because that's what I'm asking.
If you didn't love something, you wouldn't be bereft.
Yeah.
I mean, if you lose your crappy old sneakers that you don't care about, who cares? I'll go buy a new pair. But if you lose your very favorite pair of party shoes and they're irreplaceable, that's going to have a different impact.
Right.
But the reason that we go back to this is because whatever happened as our first loss is what impacts us for the rest of our lives.
No.
And we never knew that. Like, people haven't been taught that. People haven't known that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we want you now to ask the question, on your own first loss, what was it and how was it handled? Were you able or encouraged to speak about it?
So, yeah, sorry, not to cut you off. We understand that we have serious, more present-day losses, and we're definitely going to be covering all loss But as I said to begin with, you sort of have to say hello to something before you can say goodbye to something. You have to, as Sandra said, basically take a look at the first losses that happened in your life. And then there seems to be, if we take a deeper look, which we're going to do, a way of handling things as we go further. And almost your first experience with loss, like, for instance, you have a goldfish at home and the goldfish dies, and you run into your parents' room and you say, oh my gosh, the goldfish died. Oh no, the goldfish is just sleeping. Takes the goldfish, dumps it out, replaces it, and that doesn't look the same. And Mom says, oh yes, honey, that's the same. So your first loss is the knowledge that, no, I know my mom is not dumb. My mom's a really smart lady, but does she think I'm dumb? Or maybe she just doesn't want to talk about loss. Or, I don't know why that happened. So then maybe I progress from there to lose a best friend, and I think that's okay. I'll just go get another one. Lose my lunch that my mom gave me. That's okay. I'll just get food from someone else. But none of those losses now. If you see where we're going with the pattern, it's sort of establishes a way in your head. I don't know how the dog was handled, but we'll go there. I don't know how the situation with your finger, situations, we go back to the first loss, and a lot of times we can help to walk through that.
Well, most of the time we don't think about it. We don't think about these earlier ones, or even what affects me. Suddenly, I'm in a new situation. What new situation happened to me? What was I encouraged to talk about new situations? How did I go through them? Am I able to talk about it now? Because unacknowledged loss remains with us our whole lives. Unacknowledged loss remains with us our whole lives. Because loss elicits a pain response, which imprints on us consciously and or unconsciously. And we don't think about that. We think, oh well, as you said, well, Mom says, well, don't worry about it, sweetie. We're going to get a new dog. I remember when we lost our dog, and in the Jewish faith, we always sit Shiva after a person has died. So I remember thinking, I wonder if we're going to do this with the dog. And so, as a family, we made a decision to contact our friends who had dogs because we probably weren't contacting non-dog people. So we contacted our dog friends and said, why don't you come over for a drink because our dog has died and we're all really sad and we have all these toys, dog toys, and maybe we could give a dog toy to each of the people who had a dog. And so we did that, and then someone said, and people started talking about the dogs that we lost, the dog we have now, how are we feeling? Oh, if you get lonely for a dog, you could come and walk my dog. None of that would have happened had we not seen those people afterward. So, a friend of mine said, oh, you're doing that for your dog? And I said, yeah, it's really important. And, the dog always slept in a certain spot, and when he came in the house, that's where the dog was. And I remember thinking, well, what's going to go in that spot now? It's just empty. So we have a little, not a statue, but a little dog, and we just put it there for the time being because we needed something to transition from having what we lost to losing what we had, which was the warmth and the memory and the love of the dog. And that's a lot of what we're going to do in these two sessions, which is learn how to transition by partnering with our loss, doing things that will enable us to feel better as we move through it.
I'm interested. Did I cut you off?
No, you never did.
When you lost your dog, how was that handled?
They looked for it. They called the next day to see if they could find it.
So you had gone somewhere with the dog?
We went for
Okay.
If I left it behind or dropped it.
Okay.
So they tried to find it, and they didn't find it. I don't find it around it. Fine, because, I mean, it was a lot.
Sure.
And I don't know that, I can't recall that one was replaced.
So that was your first loss, though, that impacted you, because you had nothing to that point called losing anything really special before that. Okay. I had something similar. So my parents got divorced when I was 10, and my brother was 12, and we had all kinds of toys as children do. And we had everything that we loved in our home. And so when my parents got divorced, my grandparents picked us up from school on that day and brought us to their house. And we didn't understand why we were going to their house. And then it was told to us that my parents were getting separated. And so my brother and I were okay. We were going to stay at my aunt's. So my brother and I go to my aunt's house, and we're kids. Where's our stuff? And my aunt explains to us that a lot of the stuff had to go in the garbage. A lot of it was just garbage, and you guys were going to be able to replace some things. We tried to keep some things. So the loss of the doll was big for you. That's why I was interested in hearing that story, because we lost all of our toys. All of our toys. So, that loss actually was horrible. So, it explains why there's no room in my house. Husband and I. No, I'm just kidding. But I did actually, not gonna lie, I just did, try to buy everything. I started working at 16, and the more things that I could get and buy, and the more things I asked for Christmas, and I feel I have forever, in some ways, tried to replace all of those toys. And, then I just want to curse eBay, because you can almost replace all of them. Alina dolls, like you can find anything. So, but it has resonated with me through my life. If you don't mind me asking, how about your finger there? How was that handled for you?
You talk about loss of parents. My father had just left home just before that as well. So my mother was taking care of me. It was a folding chair, and I pulled it in and it collapsed on my finger. And so the bone was sticking out, so it was graphic. But, and we went to the hospital, and I can remember my mother saying, I wish it had been me. And I remember thinking, you're stupid thing to say, why would you wish it was her? And I was thinking, I'll never be a model.
At that age, for sure. How could I ever show rings off? But wasn't that interesting that your mother said she wished it would have been her?
Well, mother too, it's a mother.
But that would also bring back thoughts, for sure, as you went on, that maybe you wished that you could take others' pain too.
Anybody else can share what was done when they experienced their loss?
When I was 6, my grandmother, my mother's mother, lived with us, and my mother was an only child, so she was the only one who was available to take care of her mother when she got older. And she went into a nursing home when I was 6, and then shortly after, she died. And I still remember to this day that my older brother and I were outside playing, and my mother came out. She had invited the next door neighbor, who was a widow gentleman. She had invited him for dinner. She came out and told us to go over and tell Bill not to come for dinner. My mother just died. And there was no ever discussion about it. It was all about her loss. And not that my mother was an insensitive or uncaring person. She wasn't, but this was all about her loss. And I remember a few days later, the day of the funeral, my older brothers and sister went to the funeral, but they sent me to school. And I still remember the church where the funeral was, our family, our church, was connected to the school. And I'm sitting in my classroom, and I could see it happening outside. I saw the hearse. I saw my family getting out of the cars. And I had no idea what this was all about. I didn't know what a funeral was, and there was no discussion of it.
Why am I left out? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Here?
What are they doing? Why is my family
Oh
up there?
Why did they all leave me?
Yeah.
I'm all alone.
But then, it was just, my mother wasn't capable of looking beyond her own grief to deal with her kids. I mean, there were 6 of us. She wasn't able to do that. And it was similar many years later, when I was 20, my dad passed away. And it was my mother's reaction was very similar. We were also busy dealing with her and her loss, because she was young. She was only 50. And we had to help her. But she didn't have the capacity to help any of us and to talk about it at all with us.
So, what was your takeaway from that then? You
First
don't
one, it was
matter?
like my grandmother, or my father.
Well, both of them in similar instances. We have a mother who would normally, you would think, you'd be looking for some comforting from. And did you get a sense that you kind of didn't matter? Like your brothers can go,
Yeah,
the other ones can go, but I can't go?
At the time, at least with my father, I was too young to understand all that stuff with my grandmother. But when my father died, I just remember I couldn't hold it against her. She was so grief-struck on her, for herself, that I couldn't be mad at her for not thinking about me or my brothers and sisters. But it was only in later years that has bothered me.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I suspect it became conscious in later years. But in the early years, all of those things sit somewhere.
Yeah.
We don't understand them, and we can't give words to them, and so we can't ask about it or talk about it.
And even like with my grandmother, even when she went into the nursing home, we weren't told about that. This one day she was gone, and I adored her because she lived with us my entire life, and she was a big part of the family. And but that's just the way my family was. They didn't talk about things.
But many of us came from families where they didn't give us the example of talking about it and sharing. If they could, maybe they took action. And, like your family was great in terms of looking for your doll and finding out what could have happened and stuff like that. Because some parents would have just said, well, it's just a doll. I mean, they can go to the toy store and get another doll. But for us, it's not just a doll. Things have certain meaning and certain importance for us.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I was 14 when my dad died, and my biggest memory was how well my mom handled it, thinking about the whole conversation. My mom, who lost her own mother when she was 4 and her father when she was 12, and had no training, but she was the way she handled it. It stayed with me forever.
And can you share with us how she handled it?
She was really good because Dad was at home, and she explained exactly that the time was getting pretty close, and if I didn't want to be with him, I didn't have to. He'd understand, but I was glued to him, and she explained that he wasn't going to look great, but all of those things now, and especially once I started years ago when I did palliative care, and I realized she was doing all the right things, and yet she was brought up by spinster aunts. So where did that come from?
Her intuitive sense of life, I would assume. How lovely.
It makes me think of it because it's almost the very opposite. But and I always felt fortunate about that.
You lose a mother or parent very young. I think you tend to submit it. It gets buried back then anyway. You didn't talk about it. Of course, grandmother showed up several months later. My father got married and she was awful. And that too. Go to a private school, become an athlete, all that stuff. Life story here. But later on, I was sending staff off to an individuation course in California run by the Weirs, John and Joyce Weir, Weir Labs. The takeaway with there was you never really lose anyone. Whole backstory, long, go into it. But essentially, what John and Joyce did was talk about how we perceive. And they developed a language, a percept language. I'm experiencing you now because you're in me. I'm perceiving you. There's a whole mind-body science thing.
Would you like to
Yeah, it's a
carry on
hologram
with
and
our
brain, mind, all that stuff. Yeah, no, there's science to it.
Did you hear me?
So,
Terry, did you hear me? You could carry on with our presentation if you like. Because that's what we're talking about.
okay, just to summarize it. In my case, never ends. So there's a resurrection of a grave that I hadn't visited forever. And that's getting through. But in some respects, she's still around. She's my creative part. I remember enough of her. That percept is there, and Mother in me is still alive and well, and actually getting stronger. It's sort of interesting. You never have to say goodbye and all that, but there's something to it.
Maybe you never have to say goodbye. You have to say hello to some of those things that were sublimated in order to be able to not have to say goodbye.
You know, interestingly enough, that's it, we're talking about things that we do love, and you know, sometimes, you know, I had a very, very good friend of mine, and she had a divorce, and all she said is constantly, you know, he's a loser and a lowlife, and I'm so happy he's gone, and he's gone, and he's gone, and she was just so thrilled, and you know, slowly but surely, you know, we started saying, you know, what would you like to date this friend? Would you like to take this guy out? You know, like we've got some friends here. We're trying to, you know, no. It turned into a whole woman, or sorry, man hater. Like just, you know, and as it started to progress, you know, we were like, what's going on here? Like she said she was really happy that this guy is out of her life, but I really think that, you know, looking back at it now, it was something in her that was still attached to that, and not in a good way. So it's kind of the reverse of what we're saying, you know, as we do have them as a part of our life, yes we do. But, you know, it's not always a good part of our life. But again, it was a loss that was handled in such a way that maybe there was some anger and some stuff like that that kind of jumped in to stop some feelings, let's say, of you know, loss. And then that became coping, acting out with people at work and being a man hater and so on. So that was following through rather than the sense of loss that could have been partnered with or dealt with.
Well, this is, I'm not sure how you want to call it, but lots of thought you had. And I'm thinking again now, when my brain's all this, when my mother died, I found out she had a child before. It was an uncle family. And so after that happened, I felt like I lost who I thought I knew. I was very, very close to my mother. And I mean, when you I guess I thought this after you saying how every loss also has a gain, because I searched out those people and I have a whole other family now. But there was a loss when my mother died. I think I felt more loss. I mean, I knew she was dying. She was elderly. She was very ill. But I didn't feel her loss, because I guess I was compared to that, as much as the loss of all of those things that we shared, that we knew, and how would you ever get it back because she was gone? There were thousands of questions I didn't ever get answers to. That I felt that more clearly than any other loss I've ever had. And yeah, I thought that the letter wasn't even her telling me. And I never even thought of it as a loss maybe until we started talking about it. It's an amazing story, actually. So we're talking too about secrets. Yeah, I didn't have that impact. Absolutely, have that impact. And she was very good reasons. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't any such a huge or anything like that. It was a war thing, right? Stuff was shocking. Like the loss, I wanted to know. I wanted these answers because I would never get.
What kind of market?
Yeah,
That goes over here. No, that goes for this.
Oh, okay, well, you want them, I'll give them.
We need one for that.
Just go use them.
But I won't use it. That's
Okay, give it to Bonnie.
There.
That's yours.
Yeah, it's sorry.
That's yours, Bonnie. Watch it.
Okay,
Sorry for interrupting you, but no, but that's
big. That's really big. That's a really different kind of loss.
And I think these days, so many people are finding out about their ancestors through this ancestry DNA.
Oh, yeah.
And Facebook and families and finding out things
That
that
were secret for so long.
and nobody really talked about it or told you or anything. I had the experience the other day of opening a note from a cousin who lives in Oregon, and she started telling me about our great-grandfather who no one ever talked about because he was murdered by the Cossacks. And this is how the family, there were reasons why the family moved to the U.S. and years later. And, I didn't know that. No one ever told me. I didn't even know his name. That's like trying to put your identity together and deal with who you are. And the reason, many people probably don't go into counseling, or people who, whatever, I'm not sure what I'm saying there, except for the fact that 94% of the people who go in for counseling, loss is at the base of their issues. Whether they go in for marriage difficulty or a current death or alcoholism or drugs or whatever, when you peel the layers back, you find that it's unresolved and unacknowledged losses that are usually what's at the base of it all. So it's important that we deal with these things.
Something you just said there triggered a thought in my mind. Unacknowledged. So you said unacknowledged loss. It's the loss of what could have been. It's the loss of woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Oh yeah, definitely. When you talk in terms of people losses in particular, that's a lot of times what it wraps around. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were supposed to have this life. If it was a sudden loss of a partner, for instance, your whole world is, you had these plans. My aunt was, just 65. They had just retired. They just had all the plans in the world, and now one of them is gone. And absolutely, it's not necessarily that loss. It is all the loss of what was.
Or what could have been.
Yeah, what was the plan? What was supposed to be. Yeah, what was supposed to be.
Right. And what was supposed to be.
What was supposed to be. So,
I just have a little bit different one to talk about, and it's not, I have lost my husband, as you know, and but it isn't that, because a few years before that, I lost a brother, and I was very, very close to this brother, and also very close to his wife. And at the time that my brother died, all of my feelings were toward her. We have to look after her. We have to do this for her. We did everything for her. And after a few months, my daughter said to me, "Something's happening to you, Mom. You seem depressed. There's something wrong. I don't think you've dealt with Uncle Dave's death." And I said, "Well, I think you're right. I've dealt with it through my
for your sister-in-law.
sister-in-law, but not through myself." And I actually went to counseling for that. And it was about a loss. I said, "I haven't dealt with this. I don't know how to." So
I really feel that because that's what started me on my journey. I lost my brother. And I, like you, it was all about my mother and my father. And oh my God, like it was just me and my brother. And you're absolutely right. And I think that it flatlined me. Well, it did flatline me.
Yeah.
And that's what started me on my journey in bereavement. Because, yeah, I couldn't understand how to deal with that. And how are you supposed to deal with that when you have parents that lost their son?
I know.
And so as a family, you're expecting everybody to be around and be able to comfort each other, but you're just putting all of your feelings aside because you're there for someone else.
You felt that their loss was so much greater than yours, so you didn't deal with your own.
Which was the opposite that we have with your mother, who the loss was hers, and sort of, so it's very different losses handled in so many different ways.
It makes you understand why parents who lose children often split up.
Oh,
had a very good friend who had a stillbirth, and of course, it was devastating her. And so for the first 6 months, her husband was doing everything he could to hold her together. And then at the 6-month point, she said, "Oh, I feel like I'm ready to get back into the world again." And then he fell apart, and she didn't want to have to deal with that. So she was ready to move on.
It's tragic. So,
I was just thinking, someone once asked me, as a therapist, is there one loss that you should always get counseling for? And it's the loss of a child. Because the odds are that couples can't manage that themselves. Because men and women grieve differently. And, the triggers of the past, which is what we're talking about now, are different. Intimacy triggers emotion. Couples get intimate, they get emotional, they have difficulty, and they can't complete intimacy, and then there's all the other resulting angers and resentments, etc. And suicide is the other one, where it's really important to get counseling, or some intervention.
I would just kind of, kangaroo and jump all around and say, what if you don't have children and it's just the two of you, that's the worst loss. If you've never had children or are supposed to, and it's your animal, that's the worst loss. So you know what? You can always use help with any loss. I do agree a child loss is horrific. Every loss. Every loss is horrific and unique.
Doesn't want to stay there.
It won't stay there.
Yeah.
Actually, when we first came in, Cindy was sharing with us too, standard story. The DSM-5 has now actually included complicated grief, complex grief, prolonged grief into their mental
Diagnostic.
Yes, yeah, it's actually true.
Labels, yeah.
Finally, because grief and bereavement. Brings me back to Terry. I'm just going to jump for 2 seconds on what you were saying when you were explaining that how it was back in the day. I often find it so weird because I was sitting at my mother-in-law's home, and they're Italian, and death used to be the mother or the grandmother or the person who has passed is in the living room, and all the people are there, and all the people are coming in, and the family's coming in, and here I am. I'm 22, and I'm looking through a photo album, and I said, Nona, is that person dead? And she said, oh yeah, Bunny, oh yeah, you just everybody come to the house. And I remember at the time I was working at a funeral home thinking to myself, okay, holy smokes, this person is in the living room. How did we get from having a death and something in the living room and normalizing it so much to whisk the person away, bring them off somewhere where you don't know where they are, and they're in a funeral home, and now it's this and that and this big thing. How did this all happen? And, for me, I don't know, but how can we bring it back to a normal part of life? Yes, prolonged grief and bereavement is a different situation, but I mean, we don't need to fix grief and bereavement or death. It's a natural thing, and newsflash, none of us are getting out of here without it.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is really important. Loss doesn't have to be fixed. It has to be felt. And it has to be, you have to go through the process. And the important thing that I figured out about loss is that loss is what enables us to grow. Happiness and joy and wonderful fun times give us the ice cream or the whipped cream or the joys around life, but they don't help us to grow. And that's a real hard one because we all grew up with thinking that somewhere that life was fair, and icky things weren't going to happen, and bad things weren't going to happen. But they do, and there is no fairness, I remember being a kid, and I thought, well, when my grandmother died, well, she died when I was really young, and I was very close to her. And I remember thinking, well, that's okay, because I still have other grandmothers. And then about a week later, I didn't have another grandmother. So, like, within 2 weeks, 2 grandmas were gone. And it was like, I'm so little. How could I not have any grandmas? And everybody else is talking about going to their grandma's house. And there was still a house, but there was no more grandma in the house. And, that was, nobody talked about it. And I think we all want to avoid pain. That's sort of a normal human attribute. But loss can often raise its head as we live through other personal crises, other personal experiences later on, which is why we're asking, going back to that beginning. Maybe you can't change the past. We can't bring people back. We can't resurrect the dog. And we'll try and buy all the toys again. Did it work? It didn't work.
No.
So, but you can reconcile and learn new skills for the future. Learning from the past is the only way to create how you're going to see loss in the future. So I guess the next thing we are going to ask is, what's the language of your particular loss? Are there words that come to mind when you think about what happened to you?
Yes.
This board looks like it's full, except I wrote on it with a long pen and you don't have an eraser. So we'll leave that.
Yeah.
Okay, so devastating is one of the words that comes to mind for you. Are there words that come to mind for people?
Regret.
Anger.
Just show them out.
Longing.
Unfair.
Wrongness. Longing. Sorry.
Unfair.
Guilt. Frustration.
Do we have denial?
Confusion.
I just put down unfixable. Yes.
Exhaustion.
Those are all part of that experience that people feel. And, I think you feel it. I remember thinking, you feel it emotionally, you feel it socially, you feel it psychologically, you feel it intellectually, you think spiritually, you feel it physically. So it kind of goes from in here out, and then it goes all around you, and it feels like, everything feels heavy.
And numb.
Heavy.
Did we put numb?
No.
Because sometimes
Heavy and
you
numb.
just feel numb.
I want to say relief.
Relief. Relief.
High-tech eraser. If you want to use that way.
I was going to, what I thought you might have been stuck in up to the ladies' room, and I wanted to let you know we're just going to do a really quick 5-minute in a couple minutes just for a stand-up or a senior stretch. Yeah.
So, with all of these words, I guess, and beginning to talk about it, I guess the question is, how could you grow through it? What would you have liked to have been done differently? Do you have any thoughts on what you would do now? Like you have thoughts on what you would do because of what your mom did, which was beneficial. But the ones who didn't have beneficial experiences, what would you do now? What do you need now?
So, when you were 5, or even a couple years later, do you think at this point, if you were that 5-year-old, would you have said, hey, why don't you stand up and ask what's going on? Or...
Like if I go back then, knowing what I know now?
That's exactly.
Yeah, I would.
Or if you had the opportunity to be involved with a little one around a loss experience.
I believe children need to be exposed to it, and they need to have it explained to them in terms they can understand. And it should never be hidden from them, I think. I don't think anybody benefits from that.
Right. So you changed the process rather than continuing the process.
Yeah. I just don't think my parents knew any better.
Yeah, it's not, we're not judging. Parents. It was probably that generation.
Society has different.
Listen, I worked at a funeral home, and I cannot even tell you on 2 hands how many parents would come in and say to me, should I bring my children? Well, my child's 5. What would be the age? There is no age, right? So I get tons and tons and tons of parents even today. So it's not at all anything that your parents did wrong. Just, for future reference, if we can go back in that life, like for me, and sitting on the bed. So, again, like Sandra said, we tend to take those feelings, and we don't know what to do with them, but they're in there. And even at 10 years old, when I had no choice and all my stuff was gone, I wasn't even concerned with the separation. I did it, I don't know, I tell you fighting all the time. But the thing was, where are my toys? I should have been able, and I look at it now, and I think to myself, in certain places where I don't stand up, I think to myself, you should have said something. I should have said something at that point, like, Mom, where are my toys, and when can we replace a few of them? And I should have talked, which is a huge one.
Use your voice.
Absolutely. I tend to run. Where it's fight or flight, I will run most of the time.
I ask questions all the time and make people uncomfortable. I remember asking my grandfather when he moved to a smaller house after my grandmother died. So are there going to be, now that Grandma and you don't share a bedroom, are there going to be enough bedrooms for us kids to still come and visit? And he just laughed, and I had no idea why he was laughing. I guess he was laughing because, of course, he was going to have bedrooms for us. But I didn't know that, and nobody told me that, because I used to go on the train. They were in Massachusetts, and I used to go on the train by myself, starting at 8 years old. And I know, these days you never do that with an 8-year-old, or you can. But they would drop you with the porter, and they would pick you up at the other end. Those were, as we said, those were different times. But, so what? You don't have to share this, but write on your papers. What could have been done differently? What would you have liked to have been done? What do you need now? What would you do now if you were in a situation like you were once in? while you're thinking about that, I'm making your own notes if you want to use the washroom or wheel around or
Stand up.
stand up.
Anything for 5 minutes.
Give yourself a couple of minutes. Because now we're going to tell you the process that we created in order to go from the loss, partnering with your loss, and getting better. So stay tuned. This is important.
We're going to run past 7:30.
No.
We're not going to.
No.
Oh, it's 4:07.
I know. That's why I said if we make it for 5 minutes, then we can.
We got to go down. Next time. If you love it so much, you can always have a little bit of
We won't meditate next time.
People are moving.
She lost the customer.
So, as you said, loss doesn't have to be fixed. It's a process. And
So I think we're just going to continue on only because we are kind of short in time and it seems like nobody needed to go anywhere. So sorry if I interrupted the conversation, guys.
Good. So here's the process. You want to do it on the next sheet?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Okay, please, thank you for watching the markers. So the process is, what's the best letter in the alphabet? A. The first one. A. So
we're gonna start with awareness. So we brought you back there and all through all of this to start off with awareness. That is our first word in our formula for partnering with loss. And awareness is looking at your first loss because you can't go back to replace the loss or deny it or deny that it occurred. So looking at how the first loss was handled, making sure that it is something that you are looking eyes wide open at. And the next one is?
Acknowledgement. Oh, I'm talking? Acknowledgement is, are you aware of this first loss and the pattern you've created from that loss? What were the messages you carried with you from that first loss? And is the pattern serving you well today or not serving you well?
So if your first loss was to be quiet and not ask questions and just kind of let things happen, are you still just being quiet and letting things happen today? And if that's any clearer.
Because whether we're conscious of it or not, we give ourselves a message. You know, maybe mommy and daddy didn't think I was smart enough to hear about what was happening to grandma or grandma. Or we never think they were trying to love us and protect us. Because when we're children in our first loss, everything comes back to us. You know, the child in us thinks we're the center of the world, which we are. And there's parts of us that still always want to be like that. But, you know, we make decisions in difficult times, not consciously, and we don't turn around and say, okay, guess what, guys, I figured out this. But subconsciously, that message is internalized.
And then the next A is acceptance. And the acceptance is, yes, it happened, but it is not happening right now, nor continuously, but it has had an impact on us. So accepting that whatever it was happened to you, so all, the toys were taken, so it's not happening today, but when something else happens to me, if I feel something has been, even if she takes a word out of my mouth, I know that's silly, but I mean, if something happens to me where I feel like something might be taken from me, sometimes I'm spurred back to, I either have to get it back or I have to, I have to have the last word. Sometimes I have those feelings inside of me that I need to, even though, this stems back to that first feeling of loss, I'm still using ways of coping that are not appropriate, that do stem from back there.
And the fourth one is action. Action is how we turn our pain into purpose. Because during the painful times, you tell yourself a message. I'll never survive this. There must be something wrong with me. Why is nobody talking to me? Or someone has given you a message. You're too young. You don't need to know all this.
So you don't matter.
So you don't matter.
Yeah.
Or I can't be part of conversations, so I then retreat when there are conversations and become quiet and don't use my voice and don't let people know how I feel about things. Or someone may have given you the message, which is, you could have been more helpful, or who's responsible for this? I'm not okay. And we take ownership about it, and because we think it's about us. So it's kind of like you buying into a lie, because it's really not about you. It's about whoever's having the difficulty. You didn't orchestrate the loss of your parent, or the loss of your finger, or the loss of your fertility. It's not about you. Things happen that we don't have any control over. But most of the losses that occur in life are truly beyond our control.
Yeah, but the lessons that we take away from it, in particular the person that I know have that actually lost to them, I think there was a lot of, I was blindly trusting the medical society. I'm not going to go into a whole thing of that, but there are some times where we just do whatever someone tells you. Your boss tells you, your doctor tells you, your spouse tells you. If someone tells you something and you just sort of blindly do it, and you don't say, well, is there another way? Is there any, you don't ask the questions because you got somewhere along the way, it's a trust issue maybe, whatever the original loss was. He said to me after that, what it did for me was when I was, same thing, backed up when he was younger, he was never heard, and kids are not to be heard, not to be seen, like stay out of the way, get out of the, so whatever happened. And then to find out that something else could have happened, he just kind of, okay, and signed those papers, and he just kind of let the medical community run away with no questions.
So
But not, sorry, didn't mean to start. But not every loss requires an action.
Well, I'm not going to
That's
get into that.
That's going to be that's You're so smart, Wendy.
Can't get with that.
That's fine.
Sorry.
So what's important here? What's important here is to look at what you've consciously or unconsciously been told and what you bought into, because the feelings and Bonnie was suggesting, can re-trigger and get re-triggered in subsequent losses from that first one.
It imprints, and it's cool.
Right. And we incur loss because we become attached. We have loved and we have connected, which is the message that we all want and that we all aim for. Had we not done that, we would always be bereft. At some point, we probably bought into messages, and now it's time to tell ourselves what's the truth. And what we can now do is form a plan to partner with the loss in a less painful, more productive way. So I miss that little navy blue dress with the smocking and all the pictures of me and my cousins. So maybe I can buy myself a nice linen knit dress as an adult and not keep missing that little dress. Maybe I can, volunteer at the rehab center that helped me get better. I remember this, when I was working in Boston, I remember this young woman who came in and lost her baby. And I asked her, and we'll work on this, to choose something of the baby, a trait of the baby. He was 3, not a baby, and try and incorporate that into her life. And she said, well, I'm very shy, and I don't reach out to people, and I don't talk. And he was like, if I was there with him, I didn't have to talk. He was like little Mr. Chapter, and he connected to everybody. We got on the elevator, and everybody on the elevator was knowing her little guy. So after he died, and after she was feeling better, she got a new job. And she said to me, I've decided to take the trait of the baby to my new job, so I'm going to take him with me to my new job. And I said, how are you going to do that? And she said, well, normally I would go in and I would go into my office and kind of close the door and maybe lower the shades a bit and kind of sequester in there. And she said, so I'm going to go to, it was in the States, I'm going to go to Dunkin' Donuts and buy donuts and walk in, keep the door of my office open, and go and introduce myself to people and bring them some donuts. And she did that, and she said, I felt like he was with me the whole time that I was doing that.
Interesting when you jumped in and said about the volunteer at the rehab. So this gentleman, with all his hurt and all his pain from losing the limb, it was just terrible. You can imagine, your whole person is different, and you're this, man who's helping, and you lose them, and now suddenly, a 7-year-old could basically push you over, and you're feeling nervous and scared and hiding it, don't want to talk to anybody about it, and then all of a sudden to be able to turn, as Senator said, the pain to purpose, going back and volunteering at the Shaver with people who are having similar things happen with them. What a gift that was for that gentleman, to be able to actually, instead of, hiding it, being afraid of it, and denying it, and all of the things we're talking about, actually, to be able to, at the end of the day, then go on and turn that around and be able to volunteer and talk about what happened to yourself was so freeing and turned the whole circle.
So many of us get involved in things because we've had connection to them. I was thinking of you with the toys. I was thinking you could probably buy a couple, 1 or 2, and not buy a whole store.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, when I was, I don't know, like 40 or whatever, I took a look and I thought, what am I doing? Like, I had these, Legos wobble, but they don't fall down. I don't know if you remember. They, like, stupid things. What am I ever going to do with these things? I mean, my daughter's 20. Like, she's never, like, what are they? I'm not going to save them for her grandchildren. It was so silly. So, yeah, a couple of my favorite things, and the rest of them had to go, along with the understanding of, why I wanted to hold on to everything and everybody. And I saw it play out through all my life. When I lost my uncle, I wanted things. I wanted things. And I know I can put that back to having those things. It just kept replaying for me until I took action.
There's something you could control. Everything else was outside of your control.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I guess what...
yeah, sure. You go ahead and do it. Sure. Yeah, because
it's time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't replace a loss with things. I guess the message we want to provide for today is that you have to go and grow through it and not be ruled by it. It's part of you. You losing your finger is part of you. It's part of who you now have become. It goes along as you grow and evolve. But it's not the whole you. Loss is not the whole you. We learn from our struggles, and every new learning that we make signifies some healing. Growing can be painful. It's not easy to admit. Maybe we made a poor choice. maybe we've allowed some things to happen, maybe we haven't made a good decision. But as we come face to face with ourselves, I think we learn about ourselves, and we learn about life, and we can begin to integrate loss into a new and meaningful action. So we're turning that pain into purpose. And we have to ask ourselves, now that this has happened, what shall I do about it? Will I grow from this experience, or will I be victimized by it? And a lot of times in struggles that I've had, I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl's comment in The Brutality of the Concentration Camps, as that brutality pressed in on him. I don't know if any of you have read the book by Viktor Frankl. He did an imagery every day to manage, he did two things every day to manage in the concentration camp. He imagined his future as a professor teaching students about the meaning that can come from suffering. And the other thing he did was he stole a little bit of the tiny bit of food he had and fed a little bird every day. Trying to think of the meaning that can come from suffering, I remember him saying the words of Nietzsche were, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." When we partner with our loss and make the decision to learn from it, our healing is not just underway. It is a foregone conclusion that you've adopted a new perspective and hence a new you. That you're not going to carry that old patterns with you, and that there's a possibility for change. In this action, we honor the person or the experience of what we had, rather than diminishing it and continuing to be in pain. Because if I asked any of you who've lost a person as your loss, or your animal, would they want you to continue to be victimized, or to suffer, or to not respect or honor them? And I can't imagine any of you would say yes to me. You're all saying no. They don't want me to do that. They want me to honor them. They want me to remember them. They want me to be courageous and then keep them, as you were suggesting, Terry, find ways to keep them in my life. So we moved from losing what we had to partnering with what we love and lost.
And the partnering will continue. That's Monday. It might feel a little bit lighter than this Monday.
and we'll learn how to grow and restructure our thoughts, so it will be easier to affect what we say and what we do, what we think and what we do. Because everything starts with a thought. So, happy thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
See you next week.
I'll see you next week.
If you want to bring your papers back
Oh, you were part of the... Oh, yeah. So you did? You only got one? Yeah.
And he always told us that doing things that considered all of it. Yeah. So that it was shocking to me. But I mean, but impressive.
Well done, that was lovely.
It wasn't true. He said it was true. He said he was
See you next week. You enjoyed it? Yeah.
So, I think about that now. I said, I think I see how he does it. How great it was. And a lot of people ask about this one. He's so straight. And so, you know, I owe it to have to go through and have a good life. Today, like, otherwise I'm just wasting what he had this and he again. So I've got to go for him and have a good life. So, I think that.
I'm sorry for laughing.
I know.
Well, I did. Yeah.
So that's the smart way to do it. But it's years. I'm taking pictures of this. But I think like when I do
The best person. I said, Tom, why not me? Why not? Why anyone? You know, that meant a lot to me too.
So you're okay, right?
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful.
Excellent.
Yeah, we'll do.
Very, very.
Thank you so much.
You're good.
This is Will.
She was in earshot. I have to say it was a wonderful presentation.
Okay, because I started kicking you, and I was like, what's that guy getting sick? Hi, I'm Bonnie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And this is my friend Tom.
Hi, Bonnie. Hi, wonderful.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, Minnie, yours was quite nice as well.
You're good. You're really good.
It was wonderful for having you come next week.
Yeah, I planned on it.
You know, even for non-participants, it's all come early.
You shouted out a word.
You did, you shouted out anger.
You were participating. You were here as
That's right.
Well, there's also a lot of courage in terms of coming. People share.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Most people.
Which was pretty amazing. This is not a community share. I mean, usually people don't share openly. It was nice.
So through your presentation, you can see people opening up their lives, and I think that meditation course was
Yeah, I thought that also might have been just a little
A little too long.
But that's
Well, it's
yeah,
not
we
gonna
don't
go
for
for
drink
drink.
really.
Never say no to that. Just see that little
Yeah. I deleted it.
I put it in, you know, like,
Yes.